Hey there, fellow movie enthusiasts. Today, we're about to embark on a mesmerizing journey through Last Night in Soho. The movie begins with Ellie, a young girl who loves to dance in her room. She dreams of becoming a fashion designer. Ellie lives with her grandmother, Peggy, because her mother, who was also a fashion designer, sadly took her own life when Ellie was little due to her mental health struggles. Sometimes, Ellie catches glimpses of her mother's reflection in the mirror. Peggy shares a letter with Ellie, and it's great news that Ellie has been accepted into a fashion school in London. Ellie is excited, but Peggy also wants her to be cautious. She mentions that there can be unkind people in the city where she's headed, and she's constantly concerned for Ellie's safety because Ellie has a unique ability to see people that others can't. Even though Peggy is worried, she understands that Ellie's dream is to become a renowned fashion designer. Reluctantly, Peggy allows Ellie to pursue her dream. Ellie packs her things and takes a train to London. However, her journey takes an uncomfortable turn when the cab driver makes unsettling remarks. To avoid any further discomfort, Ellie gets out at a store and waits for the driver to leave before continuing to her accommodation. Once she reaches the university residence, Ellie is introduced to her roommate, Jocasta. They both join the other girls to have a good time outside. However, while Ellie is in the bathroom, she accidentally overhears Jocasta saying unkind things about her to the other girls. Feeling hurt, Ellie leaves the pub. As she walks outside, she notices an older man staring at her with a smirk on his face. One night, as Ellie tries to sleep in her room, she's disturbed by a noisy party happening outside her door. There, she meets a young man named John, who seems to be the only sympathetic person among her fellow students. The next morning, Ellie wakes up late, but manages to arrive on time for her class attendance. Unhappy with her current living situation in the university halls, she decides to search for her place. After some searching, she ends up moving into a bedsit owned by the elderly Miss Collins. Miss Collins provides her with a set of rules to follow and requests 2 months' rent in advance, along with a 2-month deposit, as previous tenants have inexplicably left after just one night. Ellie agrees to the terms, not paying much attention to the rules because she already likes the place. That night, Ellie plays classical music before going to bed. When she awakens, she finds herself transported back to the 1960s. She steps into a venue called Café de Paris and sees her reflection as another young woman named Sandy. Ellie observes events unfolding as if she were a spectator. Sandy aspires to be a singer at the venue, but faces unwanted attention from a surly patron. She is advised to speak to a man named Jack about becoming a singer. Sandy meets Jack, and they enjoy dancing together until the patron starts making rude comments. Jack takes matters into his own hands and punches the rude patron in the face. With the patron temporarily stunned, Jack and Sandy seize the opportunity to escape from the venue and make a run for it. Jack kindly offers to drive Ellie back to her home, which surprisingly turns out to be the same address as Ellie's. When Ellie arrives, she is astonished to find Sandy preparing to sleep in her bed. However, when Ellie attempts to touch her, she suddenly awakens in the present, realizing that the entire experience was just a dream. Back at college, Ellie channels her dream inspiration into designing a dress that is reminiscent of what Sandy wore in her dream. Meanwhile, Jocasta discovers a love bite on Ellie's neck, raising questions. In her quest to revisit the 1960s, Ellie goes to bed that night, hoping for another dream journey. In the dream, Jack introduces her to the owner of a different venue called the Rialto, where she auditions for them. Impressed by her singing talent, they inquire if her real name is Sandy, to which she responds that it's her nickname for Alexandra. They offer her a role as a special assistant, which delights her. Ellie leaves the nightclub with Jack, excited to buy a new wardrobe for her job. She decides to return to her rented bedsit. The next morning, Ellie decides to dye her hair blonde, inspired by Sandy. She visits Sandy's clothing store and adopts Sandy's fashion style, even though the clothes are expensive. Ellie also uses Sandy as an inspiration for her dress designs, which her teacher appreciates, while Jocasta mocks her. After college, Ellie spots the Rialto, the venue where she witnessed Sandy performing in her dream the previous night. This astonishing coincidence prompts Ellie to seek a job at a nearby pub. On her way back to her room, the old man who had been observing her the other night follows her. He recognizes her, primarily due to her distinctive hair color, but he assures her that he is not attempting to make advances. In their brief conversation, he inquires about her name and her mother's name. Ellie informs him that her mother is deceased and then departs from the encounter. In subsequent dreams, Ellie continues to visit the Rialto, only to discover that Sandy's life is far from the glamorous dream she once envisioned. Instead, Sandy performs as a backup dancer for other female performers, entertaining the audience. Furthermore, Ellie witnesses a conflict between Sandy and Jack, who suggests that, in order to find success in the music industry, she must cater to the desires of certain influential men. Sandy vehemently rejects this notion. In another one of her dreams, Ellie finds herself in Sandy's bedroom when a creepy man enters the room. She screams for help on Sandy's behalf, and it seems like the man may have heard her, but simultaneously, the alarm clock rings, jolting Ellie awake. The following morning, Ellie heads to college as usual, but her experience from the previous night has left her in a somber mood. She struggles with her designs and becomes frustrated, even tearing up a pink dress design she had been working on in class. Fortunately, her teacher intervenes, offering support and guidance to help her get back on track. While working at the pub, John approaches Ellie, expressing concern about her recent distress. On one of her subsequent trips to the 1960s, Ellie observes that Sandy's life is taking a darker turn. Jack has coerced her into engaging in various forbidden activities. Nevertheless, Sandy encounters a police officer named Lindsay, who treats her with kindness. He advises her to leave the club, emphasizing that she deserves a better life and must distance herself from Jack before things worsen. However, Sandy remains skeptical and disregards his counsel. Lindsay reassures her that she deserves a better life than the one she's currently living, and suggests that looking in the mirror will reveal the truth. Interestingly, it appears that Ellie serves as a reflection of the innocence and truth that resides within Sandy. As Sandy disparages herself, Ellie tries to communicate with her through the mirror. In a surprising turn of events, Ellie manages to break through the glass and reach out to Sandy. However, Ellie abruptly awakens from her sleep to find herself surrounded by the spectral figures of all the men who had exploited and mistreated Sandy in her dream. This haunting experience leaves Ellie exhausted, and she avoids returning home out of fear, spending late nights at college instead. Seeing that Ellie appears unwell, John invites her to a Halloween party to lift her spirits. At the party, Jocasta and her friends offer them drinks, and everyone starts dancing. However, amid the festivities, Ellie is plagued by ghastly visions of the men who had exploited Sandy, and she sees herself dancing alone. Concerned for Ellie's well-being, John takes her back home when he notices her condition deteriorating. In her room, Ellie experiences a new dream, depicting Jack attacking Sandy. In her dream, Ellie desperately shouts at Jack to stop, but he fatally stabs Sandy. The commotion alerts Miss Collins, who overhears and instructs John to leave, as her rules prohibit male visitors. She simply advises Ellie to go to bed. The following morning, Ellie apologizes to Miss Collins for the disturbance and asks if a woman has died in her room or if she knows anyone named Sandy. However, Miss Collins claims not to know anyone by that name. Ellie then heads to college and starts putting the final touches on Sandy's dress. To her horror, she suddenly sees Sandy's lifeless body covered in blood, causing her to flee from the class, only to find herself surrounded by haunting figures. Ellie, in a shocking turn of events, stumbles upon Jack's lifeless body, only to discover that he is the same old man she encountered at the pub. Distraught and believing that the old man is actually Jack, and that he has gotten away with murdering Sandy, she rushes to the police station to report the murder. However, the detectives do not believe her claims. In an attempt to uncover the truth, Ellie and John head to the library to search for cases of disappearances and murders that occurred in the 1960s. To their surprise, they find that most of the disappearances were of men, not women, and that these men vanished after a night in her neighborhood, Soho. During their library visit, John returns Ellie's forgotten bag from the party. Ellie decides to confide in John, revealing her ability to see ghosts and recounting her recent experiences. She begins to hallucinate the ghostly men following her in the library, nearly leading to a dangerous situation with Jocasta. John intervenes and runs after Jocasta to explain the situation, while Ellie leaves in a state of panic. On the street, She spots Sandy's ghost and tries to chase her, but is blocked by other apparitions. This delay causes Ellie to arrive late for work, where she encounters the old man again. Determined to get a confession, Ellie discreetly records a conversation with the old man, confronting him about Sandy's murder. However, he vehemently denies any involvement and shifts the blame onto someone named Alex. He insists that whatever happened to Sandy was of her own making. The old man leaves the pub, and as Ellie tries to follow him, he tragically gets struck by a taxi and dies on the spot. It is revealed that the old man was not Jack, but rather the kind police officer named Lindsay, who had shown concern for Sandy. Heartbroken and overwhelmed by her experiences, Ellie decides to leave London and requests John's assistance in returning to her grandmother's house. John agrees to help her with this decision. They drive to Miss Collins's house to collect Ellie's belongings. Ellie instructs John to wait in the car for 15 minutes, and if she doesn't return, to check on her inside. Ms. Collins warmly welcomes Ellie and offers her tea to help calm her nerves. During their conversation, Ellie learns that a detective had visited Miss Collins because of Sandy's murder, sparking her curiosity. Miss Collins then confides in Ellie, revealing her true name to be Alexandra, the same name Sandy had told Jack before. She explains that due to a life filled with abuse, she ultimately decided to take revenge by fatally stabbing Jack. This vengeance extended to all the men who had mistreated her. Miss Collins also discloses that she has poisoned Ellie's tea and intends to make it look like a suicide. As John grows concerned about Ellie's prolonged absence, he enters the house in search of her. Ellie summons enough strength to warn John to flee, but Miss Collins attacks him. Ellie desperately attempts to escape, encountering the younger Sandy, who seems to be attacking her. Amidst the chaos, a fire ignites and begins to spread rapidly. Ellie manages to lock herself in a room, where the spirits of Sandy's victims manifest, pleading with her to exact revenge on Miss Collins. Despite their pleas, Ellie refuses to take a life. When Miss Collins enters the room, she too witnesses the apparitions of the spirits and experiences the torment they endured. She realizes that she has become just as monstrous as the men who had harmed her, struck by the ghostly figure of Jack. The horrifying revelation dawns upon her as she confronts the consequences of her actions. She tries to kill herself, but Ellie stops her. Miss Collins decides to remain behind and face her fate in the blazing fire, allowing Ellie to escape. Ellie manages to get John to safety just as the medics arrive on the scene. Miss Collins, however, embraces her demise amidst the consuming flames. Later, Ellie takes center stage at a fashion show, proudly presenting her work. Her grandmother, Peggy, is in attendance, beaming with pride at Ellie's accomplishments. John is also present, enthusiastically cheering her on, joined by the rest of the delighted audience. During this moment, Ellie once again sees her mother's reflection in the mirror, reminiscent of moments from the past. It appears that Ellie is finding her way back to her own life. As friends and well-wishers come to offer their congratulations, Ellie catches a glimpse of Sandy's reflection in the mirror, waving at her. The movie ends here,